Hi, this is Bobbie Carlton. I'm the founder of Innovation Women, and we have another edition, a special edition of our Innovation Women webinars. So today we are talking with Joan Michelson from Green Connections Media, and she also writes for Forbes, about seeing the opportunities in staying at home. And if you have any interest in checking out the Forbes article that Joan wrote, the link is in the Attachments tab. If you have questions, put those in the Ask a Question tab. So we're going to get just right to things and jump right in. And Joan, I'm going to ask you to actually introduce yourself today.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so much, Bobbie. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to the fabulous Innovation Women audience. The short version is I've had a career in corporate America and in working in journalism with major media, from 60 Minutes to WTOP to Forbes. And I launched a podcast where I interview women innovators and leaders in social responsibility, which means energy, sustainability, climate, diversity, caring about each other, basically. And I've interviewed about 250 women. And I write for Forbes on the same kinds of issues, plus on careers. And in all my podcasts, we have a section where we give career advice as well, because I also do career coaching and public speaking.
Great. And recently you wrote an article called 10 Ways to Use Working Remotely or Self-Quarantining as an Opportunity. And I just love the positive perspective and the ideas about things to do. In our house, we've got a list on the whiteboard of all the things you can do if you're bored or looking for something to do, and I think this was kind of the digital version of that.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, it came about because I had clients, it's funny, we all talk about being overworked and not having time for things, and then at the same time I had clients and friends and colleagues complaining that they were not getting anything done, or they were, not really, quote, bored, but they were sort of lollygagging around, and that's fine if that's deliberate. But what I turned around and said was, instead of complaining about the things you can't do, look at this as a gift of time. I mean, it's all in your perspective. It's all in how you look at it. So in addition to being grateful for our health and well-being and that of our loved ones, of course, that we can use the time to do, among other things, more focused work that we don't normally have the time to do. You may not be able to control going into the office or going to events, but you can certainly control your attitude. So what I've said to people is, let's revisit your goals. Let's look at your goals and say, what are the focused projects that you wished you had a few hours to do, and let's look at those. And first of all, reflect and see if they're still relevant, because I understand a lot of people are kind of doing some soul-searching or finding changes they might want to make in their goals at this time. And so, what have you not had time to do? And so and frankly, I was thinking about it for myself. So I thought, well, I'm probably, obviously this is something that's touching a nerve. So I decided to write about it and put some ideas together.
That's great. Super helpful. And I think one of the things that a lot of us look at is, kind of like those projects, the big list of to-dos we all have.
Absolutely. And also in this particular situation, because it's so life-changing, world-changing, everybody going through it at once, that you really do want to look and say, has my focus shifted? Is there, I wrote these goals 6 months ago or whenever. Are they still relevant? Do they still resonate with me in the context of what we're going through now? And give yourself permission to adjust those a little bit. I mean, obviously any timelines you've given yourself are going to have to adjust, right? Instead of saying I'll achieve X, Y, and Z by December 31st, 2020, you might need to move that date a little bit because everything's come to somewhat of a standstill recently, over this pandemic. So what I said is I broke it down into buckets, really. One bucket is using the time to raise your visibility and your influence. One is to, if they're in the Innovation Women Network, maybe look at the speaker topics you're either looking for if you're an event manager or that you speak about if you're a speaker. Maybe something's come up in the course of this pandemic or inside of yourself going through it that you might want to change your speaker topics. Look at the list of events and speakers that apply for a few, or reach out to some speakers if you're an event manager. But also look at writing blogs you've always wanted to write. I mean, one way to boost your influence in today's world is you can post blogs anywhere for free, virtually. I mean, you can post them not anywhere, but you can write on LinkedIn, you can write on Medium, for example, for free. So what's your expertise? What are you going through right now in this pandemic that's relevant to your work so you can demonstrate what you know? And then a lot of us, I do book coaching as well, which just kind of evolved from some of my clients wanting to write books, and I'm writing a book. So maybe you've talked about writing a book, you've thought about it, take the time to do an outline about it, and let's take a look at it.
I actually talk a lot to people about building their foundation and, putting together all of the things that they need to be known to be the expert or be seen as the expert.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I've talked to my clients about it too, especially with people who are looking to transition to a new industry or look for a new job or they want to get a promotion. You have to show what you know, especially for women. Women tend to get judged more on performance than potential. So you have to combine them by demonstrating what you know. I had a client, for example, who has been pivoting from healthcare to communication. So she wrote some blogs that demonstrated what the linkage was and her expertise in communications within the healthcare context and how it applied to other industries.
That's great. That is super helpful. So.
Then the other bucket is increase your knowledge and expertise. You have the time now to do webinars, to take online classes, to do trainings. So what do you wish you did better or knew more about? What do you people who are on this webinar, or, do you want to get better at public speaking? Do you want to apply explore doing a TEDx talk? Do you want to get better at QuickBooks? I mean, whatever it is, now's the time. You can set aside anywhere from an hour to a few hours to learn more about the things that you feel you want to learn more about. I don't know about you, Bobbie, but I tend to save a lot of articles I want to read. The trick is getting back to them and then going back and reading them, actually.
Yeah, no, I've got the big stack of books, business books and such that I buy when I meet the authors, and there's a whole bunch of them that I would love to be reading and just never seem to get to. And I'm actually starting to read them these days.
Well, there you go. And, of course, you can listen to podcasts. I mean, I'm biased because I produce one. But I also listen to other people's when I'm taking a walk, for example. Or one of the other buckets we'll talk about is nurturing yourself in your home. And sometimes I listen to podcasts when I'm doing extra cleaning. It's much more fun or if I'm not listening to music. But, it's a great way to benefit from the time and catch up on things you've wanted to do.
Yeah, and I also think there's a tremendous amount of content that is coming online right now. And, it's like, boy, the world's your oyster if you've got the time right now to learn from all of these things that are popping up online.
Well, that's true. And the other one is if you want to do online trainings and webinars, you can also deconstruct how other people are doing them. Like, the system that you're using today, Bobbie, I'm learning from. The systems that other people use and how they connect with people, I'm learning from also. Because there's so many ways to do these now that make them smoother, and some work better than others, et cetera. So there's also the lesson in how you do what you want to do. The other thing is, when I go to events, I choose events based on who I want to meet, who's going to be there, not just the topic, unless I'm, of course, speaking at it. So, for example, you can still do that with webinars and online trainings now. So if somebody's speaking that you've always wanted to connect to, even though the topic might not resonate with you specifically at that moment, you can sit in on the webinar and then later drop them a note and say, oh, I loved your webinar on blah, 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 and would like to talk to you, and you can connect with them on LinkedIn and et cetera. And it gives you a way to build that relationship even though you can't see them in person.
Yeah. We've actually got a question here from the audience where we're being asked, could you share some strategies for setting realistic goals during these unprecedented times? And I think this is really getting toward that balance of, is this the time to basically invest in yourself and learn all kinds of things, or is it time to think about self-care?
Mm-hmm. It's really both, and because I think they balance each other out. A lot of people are more comfortable having routines right now, and that's you can have your routine, your work routine, and then you can have your nurture yourself and your home routine. I mean, one of the things you can do with this time is the next bucket is nurture yourself in your home. So you can do arts and crafts projects. One of my favorite people is Jack Canfield, and he loves vision boards. In fact, I think I've heard Oprah talk about them too, where you create a board of pictures and words that represent your goals, and you look at it, and it helps you focus on those goals. So you could do arts and crafts projects from, mending socks or whatever, all the way to doing vision boards or making clothes. Some people are making masks for themselves and people they care about, and for the healthcare workers or whoever also. So you can use it for that time. You can declutter your closet. I mean, how many of us have clothes that we're realizing we're not really wearing, right? Try a new recipe. I love to cook personally, so I've been trying a few new recipes that I have wanted to try and really hadn't been wanting to take the couple hours or so to do, and now's the time to do it. Give it a shot. That'll nurture you also. So for goals, it depends on what your goals are. So if your goal is that you want to write a book, for example, then this time is a good time, because you can now say, I'm going to have by the end of the year, or pick a time frame, I'm going to have, you can give yourself, let's put it this way, why don't you give yourself a goal for the next month and say, I'm going to do an outline of my book by whatever, May 31st, okay, 2020. And then say, I'm going to write the first chapter by June 30th and the second chapter by July 30th, et cetera, and go through that way. That gives you, it's probably more time than you need. It depends on what else you're doing with your time. But make it measurable and make it time sensitive so that it gives you an urgency and it makes it important so that you make the time. And also, importantly, put it on your calendar. Schedule the time, whether you're best writing first thing in the morning or later in the day, put it on weekends. I work on my book a lot on Sundays, so that's kind of book day for me. So everybody has their own rhythm. So have your goals match your rhythm and what your workload is now when places are shut down.
And of course, every November is the National Novel Writing Month, and there are tons of these online pep talks and plans and things like that, because the goal is to write a 50,000 word manuscript between the beginning of November and the end of November. So I'm sure there's probably a lot of kind of leftover or soon-to-come resources that you can adopt from and grab now, if you want to do that.
Exactly. What I do with my book coaching clients is I look at what is the message that they really, really, really want to get across, and what is their business model? What are they, where do they want their business to go? And then we find that Venn diagram, if you will, that overlap between the market and their message and their expertise. And we craft an outline based on that, and then we build it out from there.
That's great. We've got another question here. I'm going to say it's related to the try a new recipe. But it says, I'm going to weigh 400 pounds, and with all the baking and cooking going on in our house, meanwhile, the weather is still awful and my gym is closed. Time to give up or double down on self-improvement?
Well, I'm an exercise freak, so I would say double down. Actually, I'm in D.C., and the weather is gorgeous. I just went for a long walk, actually. It's a little windy, but other than that, it's good. I go for walks come rain or come shine. So I would say double down. There are tons of online exercise assists now. There's apps, there's classes. I'm a UCLA alum, and even my UCLA alumni group has online. They have a digital app for exercise. So I would say double down on it, and you can eat healthier. Yes, you're baking or yes, you're cooking, but that doesn't mean that you have to change the quantity that you eat, and take walks. I mean, I like to walk after I eat. I like to walk all the time. I also run, and you can get light weights at home depending upon what you can lift. Women in particular should really do weightlifting, even if it's 5 pounds, because it helps maintain your health and your bone health. So I'm an exercise person.
That's good. Excellent. We have another request for examples of if there are particularly interesting things that you've seen people doing during this time frame.
Well, I've seen some people do some of the online courses, like on edX and Coursera. I've seen people doing webinars or like taking their podcast into more of a video realm and doing a video podcast, and then having a discussion where they would normally be doing it as an event and then recording the podcast there. They're just doing that as a video and either showing it on Facebook or YouTube or some combination thereof, or wherever else. I've seen people do increase their knowledge in a whole bunch of ways. I mentioned vision boards. If you want to commit to, there's you don't always have to write a big book. It can be an e-book. It can be shorter. You could kind of combine lessons that you've learned over time. Maybe write something about what you're learning, what you're reflecting on during this time. I mean, I did an interview recently on with a woman who is an expert in brand citizenship. So you could do something, for example, on how are you responding to the brands and the advertising that people are doing during this time of the pandemic. I mean, it changes everything. So what you're going through and what you're thinking about, many other people are too. So write about it, share about it, maybe hop on one of the technologies, experiment, learn how to do a webinar, learn how to do a podcast. Take a shot at it. Now is the time to experiment because you have the time.
Yeah, and I'm also seeing a lot of discussion around if you are not doing things virtual, if you are not doing things online right now, it's as if you've disappeared off the face of the earth, because there is nothing except what is online at this moment. So,
well, that's an interesting point, and that also brings up your LinkedIn profile. I'm surprised at the number of people. I mean, I know they only have 600 thousand million people on LinkedIn, so they claim. But I still run into people who kind of disdainfully say, "Oh, I'm not on LinkedIn." Well, you know what? To your point, Bobbie, if you're not on LinkedIn, you basically don't exist professionally. Because anybody who's going to look to hire you as a speaker or as a consultant or as a coach or as an employee, the first thing they're going to do is look for you on LinkedIn.
Yep, I totally agree. It's become really the corner drugstore, the networking, the everything, and I think people that are backing away from the technical and the digital need to really jump up and embrace it.
Well, I agree, and it will make your brain think differently and give yourself time to be unoverwhelmed for periods of time. I mean, I did a deep dive into a technology I'm learning this weekend, and I think I stretched my comfort zone so much I moved it, frankly. But that's a good thing. Now is the time to do this. Look at other people's LinkedIn profiles who you respect. Look at LinkedIn profiles of people who have gotten jobs that in ways that you think, might resonate with your career or your choices. Or look at TED Talks and look at, if you're a speaker, you can deconstruct how people are doing speaking gigs now. You want to listen for the content, but also back up and look at it from the way they put their speech together and the way they're delivering it.
We call it
Go ahead.
We call it going to school on something. I when I talk to people about public speaking, and I do a lot of media training and things like that, and I say, the best opportunities you have are right there in front of you. Watch what the experts are doing. We've all got TED Talks and TEDx to look at, and we can look at the anchors who are doing interviews with famous guests and see how those are being handled if we want to think about how you train yourself for media interviews. Take some notes, watch what they're doing, take note of the tactics that they're using.
Exactly. And also I would say that watching those and listening to the interviews, whether it's podcasts or on webinars or videos, with people who are not so famous, because famous people are going to elicit a different response from an interviewer, and they're also going to have a different body of experiences to refer to, and they're going to have a different kind of experience. So look also at people who are in your industry, or people who might be less well known, or people who you respect tremendously, or your role models, whoever your role model is. And also then reach out to them and say, if something resonates with you, hey, I saw your comment on this video, you can make a joke of it. I'm using this time and where we all have to stay home to catch up on things, and I know you did this last year, but it's really cool, and this resonated with me, and it gives you a chance to maybe connect with somebody who you wouldn't otherwise connect with as well.
Yeah. And again, folks, if you have questions, just pop those in the Ask a Question tab. We've got a couple more here. This one is, my job very much depends on face-to-face with people. Thoughts on how I convert that to a virtual job?
Well, there are a number of ways to do that. One is connecting with them on LinkedIn. But if your job is if you're meeting with people, you can just do Zoom calls, you can do Skype calls, you can do FaceTime calls. You can just do it through video or just pick up the phone. And to say my job relies on face-to-face, I think everybody benefits from face-to-face because you have the nonverbal communication. But unless you're a doctor, and even then you're getting into telemedicine, and those are often, just done on video, you can find a way to do it virtually, and you can find a way to see somebody, if you will, through video online. There's so many technologies now, and Zoom and Skype are free, at least up to a point. So I would just, however you want to do, whatever your thinking is of how you would normally connect with somebody face-to-face, just do it by video. A lot of people are even doing conferences and events by video. They're doing Google Hangouts or whatever, and you guys do this, I think, at with Innovation Women and Carlton PR. So there are a number of technologies you can use to bridge that gap.
Yeah, I'm amazed at all the things that can happen virtually these days. We've even been looking into how you can do networking online. And, I have had a number of events that I've gone to where, they basically pull us all in on Zoom, and they do random sorting of putting people into breakout rooms. Mm-hmm. And, so far, there has not been one of those that I have been in that has not been absolutely delightful and helpful and everything else. Like, really good connections being made.
Oh, that's great. And, it's interesting that you say that, because I was interviewing someone recently who talked about trying to keep together their, quote, tight-knit team. And what we ended up coming down to is being able to see somebody when they're at home now in their, quote, natural habitat, so to speak. It's a different kind of bonding. It's more authentic. It's less sort of formal, professional. They're a little less on guard. Maybe, you get a sense of their home. I mean, even if they're kids or dogs, crime in. But it's more of an authentic kind of relaxed bonding too.
Yeah, I think we're all learning to be relaxed ourselves about, when the kid appears in the screen, or the dog barks, or somebody sneezes in the other room, whatever it is, because we all know that we are all working in these environments that are potentially, they're not our offices, and they are not set up primarily for work. They are set up primarily for something that is not work. And so we have to be understanding with ourselves and with each other.
Well, exactly. And, it's funny, but there's been a trend, as I'm sure you're aware, of doing video job interviews, and this puts it on steroids, right? I remember an ad. I think they must have taken it off the air now, because they'd be slammed if they had it on. But there was an ad several months ago, or a year ago even, not that long ago, of a disdain for a job interview where it turned out the interviewee, the person being recruited, was at home, and his kid climbed into the scene, and the people who were interviewing him kind of got, upset about it. And I thought, boy, they won't run that ad now.
That is very true. I think now everybody would be like, what is wrong with you?
Right. They'd say, let your kid sit in your lap. What difference does it make? He's cute,
The BBC interview that happened, was it a couple of years ago, where the little girl kind of danced into view, and the mom was drag her out while the dad's doing an interview. And, now they're like just ahead of their time, national heroes.
Well, that's right. And look, even the Pope was doing a service by video. He did it in St. Peter's Square empty, with the square empty, but he did it there for the vibe, and they recorded it and aired it. I mean, so you can be outside and do these. You don't only have to be in your place. You just can't, go to a restaurant or, a library, but you can be outside.
Yep, absolutely. So any last words of advice as we sail off into the sunset here?
I think the other is to really give yourself time to reflect and to be, if you get overwhelmed, turn off, I'm a journalist, but turn off the news sometimes, right? And watching all that bad news, I can't watch it. And it brings you down. So there's always watching The Crown or something else on Netflix, or all the new streaming services, or I like The Voice because it's uplifting and it's beautiful music. So find something that you like to watch that gives you something else, maybe the History Channel, whatever it is for you that is uplifting, don't watch the news all the time. Give yourself the space to recharge, to not be so overwhelmed. But also think about this time. I mean, people are shifting. It's becoming a time of more social responsibility. Think about what's resonating with you now, maybe a little more. You don't have to be doing something all the time.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you all for participating and asking some great questions. Today's guest has been Joan Michelson, and she's been sharing some strategies for getting through what we're doing and taking this as an opportunity. Thanks again, Joan.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's a delight to talk to you. And by the way, I interviewed Bobbie on my podcast, too, so you can find that on my website also.
All right. Take care. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bobbie.